The Pro Wrestling Push Me poll is an objective, data-based ranking of pro wrestlers by how heavily they were being pushed month on month. Not match quality, not retrospective, nostalgic name value, but a real-time spotlight of who promoters were placing in the biggest spots at the time. The only truly objective way to gauge success in the industry. Wrestlers earn push points for main events, titles held and wrestled for, and appearances on big shows, all weighted by how big their respective companies were at the time. The 1990 MP50 Wrestler of the Year rankings are based on the combined total of each monthly score awarded for the previous 12 months. The Ultimate Warrior is the most pushed wrestler of 1990 by a big margin, winning the WWF World title from Hulk Hogan clean in the main event of WrestleMania 6 in a huge passing of the torch moment in front of the biggest crowd of the year at the Toronto Skydome. Warrior went on to hold the WWF World title for the rest of the calendar year as the biggest wrestling company in the world attempted to move on from Hulk Hogan into the next generation. The problem was Hulk Hogan wasn't going quietly. The Hulkster himself is a comfortable number 2 in the 1990 PMP50, holding the WWF World title for the first quarter of the year before dropping it to Warrior in the main event of WrestleMania 6, taking a few months off and then returning to feud with the man who put him on the shelf, Earthquake, for the rest of the year. Hogan and Warrior were very much presented as equals in the pecking order, and although Hulk wasn't champion anymore, the company was still kind of revolving around him. Numbers 3, 4, and 5 are almost neck and neck on points, but just squeaking the number 3 spot is Mr. Perfect Kurt Hennig, who started the year as number 1 contender to Hulk Hogan, then slotted in as the WWF Intercontinental Champion, racking up 2 reigns with the secondary IC belt by the end of the year. Stan Hansen makes number 4 after an incredible year as All Japan's top foreigner that saw him headline the Tokyo Dome against Hulk Hogan in a cross-promotional super show, or rack up 2 reigns as All Japan Triple Crown Champion, holding that belt for most of the year, and win the NWA US title towards the end of the year. Hansen was literally everywhere in 1990, doing Stan Hansen things and doing them well. Ric Flair's number 5 for 1990 as the NWA continued to fall further behind. Flair held the NWA World title for the first half of the year, turning heel again early on, until dropping the big gold belt to the man who comes in at number 6 for 1990, Sting. Sting beat Flair clean to win his first NWA World title at the Great American Bash in Baltimore in July, another passing of the torch moment from the company's old guard to a hot rising star. Sting's run on top did not, unfortunately, turn the fortunes of the number 2 U.S. promotion around, however, and Flair was back in the main event mix by the end of the year. Former WWF champion Macho King Randy Savage spent much of the year in a program against Dusty Rhodes in the WWF, before becoming number 1 contender to the Warrior in a hot program throughout the last quarter. He finishes the year ranked number 7. At 8 is All Japan's top native star Jumbo Tsuruta, who started the year as AJPW Triple Crown Champion before letting the Gaijin Stars take over the fight for that and focusing his attention on a compelling veteran versus rising star feud against Mitsuharu Misawa. That would be my vote for feud of the year, and probably match of the year for their first one-on-one encounter at Budokan Hall in June. Earthquake is the highest-ranked newcomer for the year at 9. The former American sumo getting a monster push in the WWF as the man who put Hulk Hogan on the shelf with broken ribs and faced the Hulkster in one half of the SummerSlam double main event. $1 Million Man Ted DiBiase is another top-line WWF heel, rounding out 1990's top 10 at 10. DiBiase was always there or thereabouts, working high-profile programs against Jake Roberts, the Big Boss Man and Dusty Rhodes, parading his $1 Million belt, and having a couple of high-profile title matches against the Ultimate Warrior as well. Moving beyond the top 10, ravishing Rick Rude comes in at number 11 as Warrior's number 1 contender for the WWF title for much of the year. Rude would have certainly finished the year in the top 10 had he not quit the WWF over financial disagreements towards the end of the year. Number 12 is New Japan veteran Riki Choshu, who held the IWGP title for the second half of the year after ending Big Van Vader's year-long run with the belt in August. At 13, Demolition became 3-time WWF Tag Team Champions by beating Andre the Giant and Haku in a big moment at WrestleMania 6. They then turned heel and added a third member, Crush, to team with Smash and cover for Axe's declining health, holding the double straps for 5 months from Mania until SummerSlam. Big Van Vader is at 14, New Japan's huge American monster heel continuing to dominate for the first half of the year before dropping the IWGP title to Riki Choshu. Vader also gained a huge amount of infamy for having his eyeball knocked out of its socket in a brutal cross-promotional match against Stan Hansen at the Tokyo Dome in February, pushing it back in and continuing to wrestle an incredibly stiff match. Vader was not only presented as a tough, legitimate badass, he clearly was a tough, legitimate badass. Kerry Von Erich is at number 15 for 1990, joining the WWF mid-year as the merger between Dallas's World Class and Memphis's CWA fell apart. With World Class a shell of its former self, Kerry was rebranded as the Texas Tornado and beat Mr. Perfect for the Intercontinental title at SummerSlam, holding the belt for a few months before dropping it back to Perfect at the end of the year. Back to All Japan and the hard-hitting American team of Steve Williams and Terry Gordy, dubbed the Miracle Violence Connection, at 16 who held the AJPW World Tag Team titles, won the Real World Tag League, and individually competed for the Triple Crown as well. Gordy, in fact, briefly won the Triple Crown title twice mid-year, first from Jumbo and then from Hansen, but was stripped of the belt after overdosing on alcohol and drugs. Gordy would recover, for now, but he would never be given a top-line singles run again. But as a tag team, the MVC were crushing it. Back to the WWF, and the Big Boss Man turned face early in the year, turning against his Twin Towers partner Akeem, getting snazzy new theme music, aligning with former enemy Hulk Hogan, and working programs against DiBiase and Rude. Boss Man comes in at 17. At 18 are the team of the Hart Foundation, Bret Hart and Jim Neidhart, who became two-time WWF Tag Team Champions with a best-of-3 falls win over Demolition at SummerSlam. Lex Luger held the NWA US title for most of the year and comes in at number 19. Luger turned face again early in the year after Sting got injured and challenged Flair for a few months while Sting recovered. Arguably, the NWA should have bitten the bullet and put the world title on Luger this year, as he was very over as a good guy again, but they didn't, and Luger remained the distant number 3 star for the NWA in 1990, some way behind both Flair and Sting. Dino Bravo comes in at a surprisingly high number 20 in the end-of-year push rankings. He started the year working an Intercontinental title program against Warrior, and then moved into being Earthquake's partner in the high-profile Hogan-Earthquake feud, often teaming with Earthquake against Hogan and partner in matches that dominated the WWF for much of the second half of the calendar year. We get a run of WWF upper mid-card stars now, headed up by Jake the Snake Roberts at 21, Jake, a perennially popular face who worked feuds against DiBiase, Bad News Brown, and Rick Martel over the course of the year. Haku at 22 and Tito Santana at 23 both score higher than I maybe would have anticipated. Haku racking up big points in the first third of the year by holding the WWF Tag Team titles alongside Andre the Giant as the Colossal Connection, and then receiving the first major televised title shot against new world champion, the Ultimate Warrior, on the Saturday night's main event TV special in April. Tito Santana was just a constant presence and was still remarkably over with the WWF fans, getting to the finals of the tournament for the vacant Intercontinental title before losing to Mr. Perfect, and then working a superb rematch against Perfect at the July Saturday night's main event. Dusty Rhodes was another veteran at number 24, still getting a solid push in the WWF, though his in-ring career was undoubtedly winding down, frequently ending up on the wrong side of the win-loss column against the likes of Randy Savage and Ted DiBiase. Jerry the King Lawler is the highest-ranked wrestler from outside of the big 4 promotions for 1990. The USWA champion weathered the collapse of the relationship between Dallas's World Class and Memphis's CWA, and by the end of the year, the USWA was essentially just the old Memphis territory once again. Lawler still claimed the USWA title to be a world title, but no one was really buying that. What the USWA did have a claim to being by the end of the year was now being the number 3 U.S. wrestling promotion after the AWA declined in size and visibility to such an extent that it had ceased promoting entirely by the end of the year. The last reigning AWA champion, Larry Zbyszko, leaving the sinking ship and jumping to the NWA. It was a sad end to the once mighty AWA, but their loss was the USWA's gain, and Jerry Lawler and Jerry Jarrett's promotion became the distant third top U.S. Fed. In at number 26 were the Road Warriors Hawk and Animal, now rebranded as the Legion of Doom, having jumped ship to the WWF mid-year and immediately challenging their doppelganger's demolition. Mitsuharu Misawa was number 27, All Japan's fast-rising native star who had shed his tiger mask gimmick mid-year and challenged the veteran ace Jumbo Tsuruta for dominance in a series of fantastic matches, clearly now being groomed for the top spot longer term by AJPW booker Giant Baba. Over to New Japan and two sets of IWGP Tag Team Champions at numbers 28 and 29. First, Masa Saito and Shinya Hashimoto, who held New Japan's double straps for much of the first half of the year, and next Keiji Muto and Masahiro Chono, who held the tag team titles for much of the second half of the 1990s. The WWF's Hacksaw Jim Duggan rounds off the top 30 at number 30, another constant presence in the mid-card who remained very popular with the fanbase. Speaking of popular in the WWF, the Rockers, Shawn Michaels and Marty Jannetty, remained insanely over in the tag team ranks, and even had a phantom win over tag team champions the Hart Foundation, which ended up not airing on TV, and the belts ended up staying with the Harts. Back to the NWA and the Horsemen combo of Arn Anderson and Barry Windham, Ric Flair's loyal foot soldiers, come in at 32. Arn had returned to the NWA at the tail end of 1989, and Windham followed him back not long afterwards. Both clearly more comfortable here than they were in the WWF, and both more than comfortable resuming their roles as horsemen. Rick Martel fully embraced his new heel gimmick as the model in the WWF at number 33, while 34 was New Japan's popular and innovative masked junior heavyweight champion, Jushin Thunder Liger. 35 were the NWA's Steiner brothers, Rick and Scott, who had reigns as both World Tag Team Champions and U.S. Tag Team Champions, and were fast gaining a reputation for hard-hitting and innovative moves and matches themselves. Less hard-hitting and innovative, perhaps, were the WWF tag team of Rhythm and Blues, the Honky Tonk Man and Greg Valentine, on the downswing of their respective careers, but still over enough as heels to work a tag team title program against the Hart Foundation. 37 was the big WWF newcomer Tugboat, Hulk Hogan's new buddy, and Dusty Rhodes' real-life brother-in-law, who came in to help back up the Hulkster against Earthquake. 38 was the WWF tag team of Power and Glory, Hercules and Paul Roma, teaming up under the guidance of manager Slick. 39 was the Black Scorpion, whom I've included in scoring as a single gimmick, even though a number of different wrestlers portrayed the Black Scorpion. The Black Scorpion ended up being such a bad storyline and angle that many would prefer it forgotten entirely, but the masked character was the main protagonist to NWA World Champion Sting for pretty much the entire second half of the year and Sting's entire title run, so for better or worse, he makes the 1990 P50. The Warlord and the Barbarian come in at numbers 40 and 41, having split up as the Powers of Pain tag team early in the year, and ended up pretty much evenly pushed as mid-card WWF singles heels. Nikolai Volkov, honestly, I'm shocked they scored highly enough to make the PMP 50 for 1990 at number 42. He spent the first half of the year in the Bolsheviks tag team in the WWF, but then turned face, reflecting the real-life thawing of relations between America and the Soviet Union, teamed with Hacksaw Jim Duggan, and then actually captained a team against turncoat and Iraqi sympathizer Sergeant Slaughter at the Survivor Series. God bless Nikolai, but I suspect he'll drop out of the top 50 pretty rapidly as we get into the opening months of 1991. Andre the Giant is also likely to drop out of the top 50 pretty quickly as we start 1991, but for the 1990 Wrestler of the Year snapshot, he makes it in at 43, largely as a result of having held the WWF tag team titles with Haku from the beginning of the year until WrestleMania 6, where he turned face again to a big pop and left the WWF. He rounded out the year wrestling a few select matches for All Japan. New Japan founder Antonio Inoki, despite being largely retired and a member of the Japanese Parliament, comes in at number 44. He only wrestled 2 matches this year, but both headline big shows, including main eventing the company's big Tokyo Dome show in February in front of the second biggest crowd of the year globally. So the matches he did wrestle scored big. Sid Vicious, the NWA's emerging monster heel, debuts at number 45. The fourth horseman, he was the muscle of the group, an imposing presence but still very green in the ring, and, as was clear when he challenged Sting for the NWA World title at Halloween Havoc, not quite ready for high-profile matches just yet. Genichiro Tenryu is number 46, and it was a dramatic year for the man previously being groomed to become the next ace of All Japan. He sensationally quit All Japan in April and helped establish a new Japanese promotion, Super World Sports, which had begun to promote shows by the end of the year. Interesting times for Japanese wrestling. All Japan veteran light heavyweight champion Masanobu Fuchi comes in just below Tenryu at 47. Fuchi spent the year as Jumbo Tsuruta's mean but loyal henchman in the heel Tsuruta gun stable. Rowdy Roddy Piper just keeps his spot in the top 50 at 48, despite having semi-retired by mid-year and moved into a commentary role for the WWF, replacing the departing Jesse Ventura. Bad News Brown quit the WWF entirely over a pay dispute shortly after SummerSlam and was next spotted working in Japan as the year drew to a close. And finally, rounding out the 1990 Push Me poll, top 50 is the highest-ranked Mexican luchador of the year, EMLL's Rayo de Jalisco Jr. Jalisco finishes the year ahead of the other luchadors, primarily due to headlining EMLL's annual anniversary show at the Arena Mexico in a famous mask versus mask match against Cien Caras and coming out on top. So that's the top 50 most pushed wrestlers of the year for 1990. A few surprises for me that I would not have guessed before starting this project. Did not anticipate seeing Nikolai Volkov in the list, and names like Dino Bravo, Haku, and Tito Santana ended up higher than I would have anticipated. Also shocked not to see the team of Doom or Sergeant Slaughter make it. Both finished just on the edge of the top 50 for the year, and as I continue into 1991 doing a rolling 12-month, month-by-month cumulative scoring system, I would expect both Doom and Slaughter to appear in the next PMP 50 when we subtract January 1990 scores and add January 1991 scores. Wrestling never stops, but this is the snapshot in time of the broad pecking order in terms of who were the most pushed individuals across the wrestling landscape for the calendar year of 1990. Hope you enjoyed this. Please like, share, subscribe, leave any comments below, and keep watching as we move on through the 90s, looking at who was pushed hardest and where.